Hi guys, thank you for joining me for the second episode of Live. Um, Today I'm going to be painting Paris. This is the photo reference that I have. It's one of the photographs that I took when I was in Paris. And I'm going to show you the four colors that I'm going to be using for this episode. It's Rockwell colors. We have raw sienna, we have transparent orange, we have ultramarine blue, 118, and we have Payne's gray. These are the four colors that I'm going to be using for this image. I didn't get a chance to draw this out, so I'm going to do a quick drawing and I'm going to show you how easy it is to do this. First of all, I'm going to show you the paper that I use. This is the Rockwell rough pressed paper. Rough texture is the yellow sticker one. They have cold press and they have smooth, but I usually like to use the rough press. So I'm gonna draw this out really quickly. I use a triangle ruler. This comes in really handy. And I use a lead pencil, 0.07 lead, so I don't have to sharpen it. That's my ruler, and that's my lead pencil, and my eraser. It's a gum eraser. It's good for making the pencil lighter, so you're not getting that dark pencil lines. So I'm just gonna lay in some shapes here. When you're drawing, don't draw every window, don't make it complicated. Draw out just the big shapes and give it enough hint for you to know where the details are. But I usually draw all my details in paint. So I will draw the big shape of the big building, the bridge, so I know where those are on my paper. Like the small details like the windows, people, trucks, all that stuff, I would just do after I lay it in, and I would just come back with a small brush and put in the details. That way you're not stuck to your drawing, and if you want to make it better as you paint and you see how it's looking, you have the option to do that. When you draw something really tight, you don't have the option of making it loose again. So if you want to do a loose painting, the loose composition that's more that speaks to you a little bit better than something tight, you don't draw as much. So just draw it with big shapes and just indicate where everything's gonna go, and draw it lightly. These shapes might change as you're painting. You might want to make something go to the right, to the left a little bit. So my lines are very light, and I use the gum eraser to just make it even lighter, so you're not seeing that much of the line drawings. So I'm not gonna spend so much time on this. Like 5-10 minutes max laying in these shapes. So I use this triangle ruler. It's really good to know where my straight lines are, and right now I'm just gonna make it a little bit lighter, so when I do the watercolor, you won't see any drawing left at the end when I'm done. Just gonna make sure some of these perspective lines are correct. I'm gonna call it, and I'm gonna start painting. So again, just to go over it, make sure you're drawing big shapes and you're not stuck on details. Details will come at the end, and you want the eye to focus where the details are, so don't put details everywhere. Just put them where you want the eye to go. Okay, so now I use this palette with all my colors in there. I'm going to use two flat brushes to get started. So I'm going to paint dry dry with wet paint. So meaning my paper is not wet right now, it's dry. And I'm going to use 2 brushes to lay this in. So I'm going to mix 2 of my colors that I have from before. It's the yellow ochre and the ultramarine blue. I'm going to keep this very simple because this image is a complicated image, right? It has a lot of windows, it has a lot of detail, but I'm not going to paint like that. I'm going to make this, I'm going to show you guys how you can make this so simplified that you can paint it in half an hour like I did, without concentrating so much on detail and making it a nice painting. So right now I'm just gonna lay in with your yellow ochre. What I'm doing here is I'm kind of putting in the values where I want it to go dark, where I want it to go lighter, and doing just kind of filling the paper right now. And then I'm gonna add my ultramarine blue on top of it for my sky. And if you mix the both of them together, yellow ochre and ultramarine blue, you get a greenish color, right? So I'm gonna, with that mix, I'm just gonna mix in some tree shapes. So right now I'm just gonna lay out the sky, and I'm gonna make this painting more colorful than it is, because right now it's very grayed out. You know, in Paris, they don't get so much sunshine, so it's kind of like a cloudy day. It's not that vibrant, but I'm gonna make it more vibrant. There's gonna be more sun, light hitting the shapes, hitting the building and the bridge. Okay, so I really quickly laid in my sky. I blocked in the yellow ochre for the light. Always remember, with watercolor, you're gonna go from light to dark. So our paper is the lightest color. Yellow ochre is our second value of comparison to that. So I laid in where my light is gonna go. I laid in where the sky is. Now I'm just gonna lay in some of my darks where the dark shapes are. And then I'm gonna separate the building from the bridge a little bit, because I want the building to go back in distance a little bit more than the bridge. The bridge should come a little more forward because it's the most, it's in the foreground. It's the most prominent element that we have. So in the foreground we have our bridge, then we have our buildings, then we have our trees and the sky behind it. So it's good to know, divide your 3 perspectives, which is your foreground, middle ground, and background. In this case, we have the foreground being the bridge, middle ground being the building, and the trees and the sky being the background. So this is my laying. I laid it in. I'm going to take a blow dryer and dry this for us to get prepped for a second layer. Okay. So the way you want to make sure it's dry, you just touch the paper. I touched that, I didn't fully dry it. It's okay, because I'm going to come back and still lay in some shapes, but it should be fully dry for you to do the second layer on it. And we're only going to keep this to 3 layers, guys. Basically, first layer, doing an overall wash where your light is and your darks are. Second layer, what I'm doing right now, is gonna define some of the shapes. I'm gonna define where my darker shape are, and I'm gonna separate my foreground, middle ground, and background from each other. That's the focus on our second layer of paint that I'm putting on. So remember, again, I'm only using these 4 colors for mixture. Why are we doing that? Because I don't want to get too many colors involved, because it's already a complicated image. So the mastery of watercolor is how simplified everything is, or how make everything. Because your eye can see a lot of elements, but when you squint and you concentrate on the bigger elements, it makes your painting better. It makes your painting simpler, and it makes your painting more better for the eye to see where everything is. So I'm laying in where the bridge is, the darkest part first, and I'm gonna just refine some of these shapes, and then I'm gonna dry it again. And then we're gonna come back with our final layer, which is gonna be detailing, some dry brushing, and that's it. So right now I'm gonna be working on my second layer. I'm mixing some of my paints. I'm introducing orange now to the mixture. I always have a paper towel next to me. If my brush has too much water, it's an easy way to just touch the paper towel and get rid of that water, because you don't want it to overflow on your paper. You want to have the right amount of water and paint on each brush stroke. With watercolor, you can't go over it too many times. It's not a forgiving medium. So you gotta make sure whenever you're touching the paper, you have the right consistency of water and paint, because you don't want to keep messing with that. The less layers you do in watercolor, it's gonna look more nicer. It's gonna look more fresh. You don't want to dirty it up by doing too much work on it. So right now all I'm doing is separating the bridge from the building. The lighter part of the bridge is going to be lighter, and the lighter part of the building is going to be darker, so we can differentiate those two shapes. And then I'm going to add some of the shadows that's going on the bridge to shape the bridge. You see, I'm still using a big brush, and I'm not getting caught up in the details. It's very important to use big brushes and to fill it in as much as possible, so you're not thinking about the small details. You're just thinking about the big shape. So what you want to do is you want to squint your eyes, look at the image, right? So I changed the colors. I made it more sunnier, right? So it speaks to us better. And I am laying in, differentiating my shapes right now as a whole. So squint your eyes and make these shapes work before you start doing any details. So just put washes until you're happy. Don't overdo it, because you don't want to go over something too many times. Like I said before, watercolor likes fresh. It likes 1-2 layers max. So make sure before you put it on, your brush, you're putting it on the paper, make sure your color and your value is correct before you put it on. I'm painting pretty fast here, you know, this whole painting took me half an hour max, you know, but so when you're doing it at home, take your time and make sure before you touch the painting, with your paintbrush, make sure it's not overflowing with water and it has the right amount of pigment and right amount of water. So first, and if it has too much water, just use a napkin and get the water out before you touch it, like I'm doing. Always keep a couple of paper towels next to you, very handy. Okay, so now that I differentiated the building shape and the bridge shape, I'm just going to do some light touches of detail on the bridge. And then we're going to do the same thing for the background. We're going to start building some shadows, some shapes a little bit better. And then we're going to put in the roof on top. But I wanted to make sure the paper is dry before I put the second layer, which is gonna be our roof. So I let that dry pretty good so it doesn't mess with the yellow ochre that's on the bottom. So now that the paper is dry and I lay in our foreground shapes, I'm just gonna work on the background and put in some of the bigger shapes. You see, I'm still using a pretty big brush. The brush is not that small, and sorry, my hand is covering here, but I'm still using a bigger brush to lay in the shapes, to lay in the roof. So don't get caught up using a small brush. Use a size bigger than what you think you should use. That way you're not caught up on details. That way you're caught up on the big shapes. Does that make sense? So you're laying in shapes, you're not laying in detail. You're laying in your darks and your lights, your shapes. And then only at the end, your third step is going to be just adding some windows, adding some maybe buses, people, whatever details we have in the picture. That is all the way at the end. Okay, so right now all you're doing is concentrating on value, on color, and laying in all your shapes correctly. Bigger brushes, guys, big brushes. So I'm just gonna lay in the roof right now. And I'm leaving out where I have the yellow ochre for the building. So if it's the building color, right, those shapes are my yellow ochre, the first lane. So I'm leaving that out. And I'm just doing the roof, the darker shape of the roof. And with this big brush, I try to give as much details as I can. And since you are using a big brush, you're not caught up on tiny details. You're just making shapes for the detail. Meaning if it's a pipe or whatever kind of a shape you have, you can just do one brush stroke with a bigger brush than getting a small brush and getting in there and doing it too detailed. So to say it's a pipe, I use side of the brush and just do one stroke, and that'll be a pipe. Meaning use big brushes for as long as you can to not get caught up on detail. Because we want to keep it nice and loose and fresh, and that's what watercolor likes. It likes it to be simplified. So once I'm comfortable with all these shapes, I'll let it dry again, and I'll come back and do some of the details. So if you're wondering what kind of a brush I'm using right now, this is called the Silver Black Velvet 3/4. I love these brushes. They're very soft. They're very expensive, but they're very soft for watercolor. Really nice, and they do good layings. I like the flats. So this is a flat 3/4 Silver Black Velvet flat brush. We're 20 minutes into this painting, and I'm almost done with the second layer. Just a few more details that I wanna do before I draw it. You see how now you can see the bridge in front of the building? It pops out because I made the bottom part of the building darker. darker on the bottom of the building where the sun doesn't hit it as much to separate those two elements. Now I'm just gonna do a few rough details. We're not getting all cut up on exact lines, exact shapes. This is a loose sketch, right? Watercolor is supposed to be loose. It's just a loose sketch. So I'm just giving it the bridge some shadow so it'll pop up a little bit forward in the building. Always remember watercolor dries lighter than when you first put it on. You see those big shapes that I put bottom of the bridge? They came out lighter than I wanted to, so I might have to go back and give it one more layer and make it darker. You'll see me doing that a little bit later on. So that's one trick in watercolor that you want to watch out for. Always go darker than you think because it's going to dry out lighter. When you first do it, it looks dark and then it just dries like a couple values lighter. So I'm going to go in and make this a little bit darker so the bridge comes out even more forward. And you see how I'm still using a big brush. I'm not getting caught up in details. I'm just doing values, color, and I'm making these shapes work. Only at the end we're gonna do the windows and the small details. We'll leave that all the way to the end, our last layer. Right now, just make sure these shapes work. In every painting you're doing, you gotta make sure your shapes, your values, and your colors work. So now I'm gonna use a smaller brush. The painting is pretty dry, so I'm not gonna use a hair dryer again. It's better to leave and not use a hair dryer and just leave the painting to dry if you have the time, but since this is a demo, I use the hair dryer for the beginning. Just because it doesn't the hot dry kills the hair of the paper. So if you have a rough texture paper, if you put the hair dryer too much or too strong or too close to the paper, it's gonna start messing with the texture. So it's just better if you're doing a nice watercolor painting, you have the time, just let it dry naturally and then come back with the details and stuff. So right now I got my shapes established. It's loose because I want it to be loose. I'm not concentrating here to make a really detailed painting. My goal is to do a rough, nice, pleasurable painting of Paris and make it loose but still have all the details and the elements and the architecture of Paris. So right now I'm just gonna start doing some darker shapes for the windows and bringing some details into the picture. So right now we are at third and final wash. So this is what I mean. We're gonna start doing the windows and the small details. So I'm still using a square brush here to laying the windows and the shadows. So I'm gonna mix my colors a little bit darker. So I'm using the ultramarine with the paint gray and adding a little bit of orange to it. And I'm gonna lay in the windows. The windows and the shadows. So sorry guys, my hand is covering it here, but I'm just laying in the windows really fast. You don't have to be too accurate because it's just again a loose painting. You don't have to get every single brush stroke 100% right. And when you do it fast, it has this way of feeling more natural and it feels loose. When you spend too much time on doing a line with a brush, then you're getting too caught up in the details. So sometimes when you do fast brush strokes, it makes it look that it's a loose painting. It's meant to be a loose painting, and you're not caught up in every detail, every structure, where the door is exactly, where the window is exactly. It tells the story if there is windows. It tells the story of the building. It gives the architecture of the building, and that's all I'm trying to do here. If I really wanted to do a really nice, very detailed watercolor painting, I would have drawn this out more detailed, and I would have spent a little bit more time doing more details. It's still all these shapes, but you just take your time more and you do it more in detail. But for this exercise, I wanted to show you guys that you can take a complicated picture and you still do it really fast, and it will still speak to you, and still have those nice shapes, and it'll be a sketch. It'll be a beautiful sketch in a short amount of time. And if you like this color palette, and you like what you did, and you want to do a bigger painting, let's say 30 by 40 inch big watercolor painting of this size, now you have your color palette, you know what you want to do, you know your values, you establish everything, then you go do a bigger watercolor painting, because it's very hard to do a big watercolor painting without any thought put into it. In oils you could paint over it as much as you want, but in watercolors it's very easy to mess up. So you want to think about what you could do to not mess up, or think about everything that your painting needs before you go ahead and start on a big painting. So right now I changed my brushes. I'm using a smaller brush, and this is let me see what size this is. This is like a number 8. It's like a number 8 brush. Fumui brush. Well, I'll put this as a download on the Kumra page for you guys to see what kind of brush it is. I think basically I use 4 different kind of brushes, 4 or 5. Same thing with brushes, you don't want to use too many brushes. Just pick a few that you think this painting is good for, and I change it up. I don't always use the same brush. I see which ones I'm going to do, which ones I'm going to use. I just pick a few brushes. Same as I do with my colors, I keep everything simple as possible. 4 colors, 4 brushes, 4 to 5 brushes. Simplify your composition, simplify your shapes, simplify your values. The more practice you have at simplifying, the better your paintings will get, and the faster they'll get, because you're already establishing everything really quickly, so it's going to move very quickly. If you complicate everything and use 20 brushes, 20 values, 20 different colors, it's going to take you longer to do. And you're going to mess up. More than likely you're going to mess up if you don't know what you're doing, if you're a beginner. So the point of this exercise is to do a painting, complicated painting, with as less brushes, less colors as possible, to get a good painting that you're happy with. So we're almost at the end. Probably 10 more minutes, guys. Hang in there. And I'm just gonna do some finishing details where I want. I put in some buses. I introduced the red in there and a turquoise. That's okay, because it's small shapes. Those colors are not in my overall palette, but I just introduced something else, some of the other colors, just to make it a little bit more interesting. It gives it more depth to it. And these are small highlights. You know, my main 4 colors are the 4 colors that we talked about: yellow ochre, ultramarine, transparent orange, and Payne's gray. And you can introduce reduce a few detail colors here and there. It's not going to kill your painting. But the overall colors haven't changed. So now I'm just going to go in and just hit a few we're going to just put a few more details here, and I'm going to take one more linear brush at the end. We just do some lines, connecting lines and some more detailed lines. So always know what kind of brush you're using, what kind of brush would be good for this particular stage. So what I do is go from big brushes to small brushes. So start out with big brushes, as big as you can. Even if you're thinking, oh, this is too big, I can't do it with this brush. It's okay, do it a size bigger than you think, and you'll get used to it. You'll get used to using bigger brushes if once you pick up a brush that you're going to start with, say, oh, maybe I should use a bigger brush, and just go with the size bigger brush, and you'll see like how easily you will get used to using bigger brushes for filling in details and doing it, and that way it's more looser. It feels more looser, your paint, when you do that, when you use bigger brushes than you should. So right now I'm at the final stage. I changed my brush to a Chinese calligraphy brush. You could get these brushes on Amazon. Just look up Chinese calligraphy brushes. There's plenty of them. They're cheap. They're not expensive, and they're good for detail. Make sure you wash them really good with soap and hot water, because the calligraphy Chinese brushes come glued and they shred a lot of hair. So what I do is when I get a brand new brush, I wash it good with hot water and soap before I use it. So just doing a few more details, adding a couple of birds in the sky makes it interesting. And I think we're at the end here. I don't want to go too much into detail because, like I said in the beginning, this is a loose. Like I said in the beginning, this is meant to be a loose painting, loose practice to do something that's complicated. With easy steps and still make it work. I'm just going to separate a few of the values here with a bigger brush. You don't want to get caught up in doing too much detail because you're going to lose your overall shapes. I try to just do the details where I want the eye to go, which is the building. So like that part of the bridge on the bottom and the left side, I just keep it as a big shape. I don't want to do too much detail there because I don't want my eye going to the bottom of the bridge or to the left of the painting. So where I want the eye to go is the middle part where the windows are. So I will do more details there than anywhere else and keep the big shapes. Don't lose your values, very important. You gotta make sure to keep your values while you're putting in detail and not changing values. And these details help bring the painting together. So at the end, when I'm happy with the painting and everything, I take a white gouache. In this case, I use the Winsor Newton white gouache. just do a few highlights. It's not meant to mix with your colors, because if you have a transparent color, you mix gouache or you mix acrylics, then it's going to be an opaque color or semi-transparent. You want to keep your colors transparent, so you could do a few layers, and at the end you could use just for highlights some white, just in a few places. And I do the same thing with the dark color. I use maybe a black or a dark color just to do a few lines. And I think we're done here. I'm gonna show you a close-up of the painting. I spent from sketch to finish 30 minutes, I think, total. I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys learned something. And here's the photo compared to what I did. I changed the colors a little bit, made it more interesting. I hope you learned something from this exercise, and I hope you guys will join me for the next live event. And please like and share as much as possible. It helps me grow. And thank you guys very much for your support.